Okay, let me know if this has ever happened to you. You find a show that you're really invested in, you watch the first couple episodes, you're like, oh my god, this is so good. And you take a minute to pause the episode and see like, okay, how many more episodes of this do I have? Because I am just so excited. And you come to find out there's only 8 episodes in the season. And you finish that season and you realize to get a season 2, you're gonna be waiting 2, 3, 4 years even. Well, if that's happened to you, hi, hello, it's happened to me too. And I feel like it's time that we start a little support group here for the people that just don't really understand on why the industry insists on torturing us, actors, and everyone involved. And I feel like in this era of streaming and media, there is a strong love-hate relationship with the way that content is released and the way that content is created. I mean, obviously, given everything with the strikes and all. And this really just didn't used to be the case, because if you remember back in the day being like 2011, 2012, when most of us were watching Disney Channel or Nickelodeon, a lot of shows had 20 to 24 episode runs. It always felt like shows were going on forever. Like they never really stopped, you know? Like I remember very vividly as a kid just watching iCarly and like keeping up week to week. And for the most part, it would just be showing all year round. Like I would never run out of iCarly content. And comparing that to now where you get like 8 episodes of a show and then have to wait like years before you see something else. Like something is up here. Something is very, very strange. And we're gonna dive into that. In this video, we're gonna talk about why show seasons have just gotten progressively shorter, the good old days of TV shows, why this industry shift happened, and how it impacts us as consumers, the actors and talent involved, as well as the industry. And then again at the end, of course, we're gonna tie this all into the strikes because I'm feeling very current in my commentary today. But before we get into any of that, if any of this sounds interesting to you, or if you like any and everything TV, pop culture, commentary, fashion, and more, definitely hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because I post videos every single week on here. While you're at it, leave a like on this video because it helps out so much with the YouTube algorithm you don't even know. And if you're feeling really generous and just like all things fashion, interior decorating, lifestyle, then you can follow me on my other socials here at Imurgency on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, because that's where I handle all that business, baby. But with that said, let's actually get into the meat and potatoes of this video, shall we? So let's start at the beginning. And by the beginning, I mean basically whenever I can really recollect watching TV. And I feel like as a Gen Z, specifically an older member of Gen Z, I feel like my earliest memory of consistently watching a show that wasn't like a cartoon was the iCarlys, the Victoriouses, the Sweet Life of Zach and Cody's, the Jessies of it all. And of course, as I got older, I transitioned into more dramas, more things that are a little bit more mature for the age group. But by and large, for a lot of these shows, their episode count per season would be more than 8 and 10, what we're seeing today. They'd be more like 15 to 22, maybe 24 episodes this season. And these episodes would run every single week. And of course, this era was different because it was during the era of cable TV as opposed to streaming. But it's just so interesting seeing this drastic shift from 22 episode seasons to essentially anywhere from 6 to 10 episode seasons. And you may be asking yourself, Rumi, why did shows have 22 episode seasons in the first place? You feel me? And I'd say that is a great question, my friend. Let me try and give you a essential answer. Essential answer? Girl, this is what you get for trying to use big words. Let's bring it back. But basically there were multiple reasons as to why shows went that long. And one of the main reasons was TV syndication. And for those of you that are not familiar with what that means and how that's applied, that's okay. I didn't either. Research. Basically, TV syndication allows for shows to be leased to different networks and TV stations as opposed to one single station, which allows for reruns on different networks at a later time. Like, think, this is a really old reference, but like Cartoon Network shows, do you remember how like they get really old and then they go on Boomerang? That-ish. And according to an article on ScreenRant.com, syndication was a big motivator for the longer TV seasons of that era, because in order to qualify for that syndication, you had to have at least 100 episodes. So putting out seasons that had like 22 to 24 episodes a season would allow you to basically get syndicated within 4 seasons, which isn't bad. Because like I mentioned before, these seasons are filming back to back to back. So that would end up being probably like 2 to 3 years max for 4 or 5 seasons. And of course, having these shows rerun would provide a lot of profit and a lot of money to these shows. Although as we're finding out from actors and writers from these strikes, where that extra money necessarily went is anyone's guess. But I'll give you a hint, the majority of it was not for the talent. And speaking of strikes, one of the abrupt reasons why we saw the change from longer seasons to more shorter seasons was actually the 2007 writer's strike. Yes, there was one before this one, and the impacts of that can be seen today. Shocking, right? But back in 2007 and 2008, during that era's writer's strike, a lot of shows saw abrupt cuts in their seasons, or they wrapped up their seasons very quickly because they didn't have content written for a proper ending to a lot of these seasons. So you saw a drastic dip in the quality of content in that era, and the seasons of that era were just shorter than normal. And while some shows were able to get off without a hitch and really have that much of a dip, for other shows the strike was very noticeable. But by and large, the industry pulled through, and this is like the first example we're seeing of, in recent times, shows being shorter and being cut short. Oh, side note, this is something kind of tangential, but something that I wanted to bring up because I completely forgot that this was a thing, but find so interesting is the whole concept of like mid-season breaks in this era. For like longer running TV shows, I really forgot those were a thing. Like, but do you remember on Disney Channel how shows would go on like mid-season breaks? So you'd have like the mid-season finale of a show, and that mid-season finale was like usually around like Christmas time, January time, and then they pick back up in like February, March. I think a more recent case of a show doing this is like Riverdale, R.I.P. But as a kid, I had no idea why shows did this. Like, I was so mad. Like, they'd always break up shows and like mid-season finales because it'd always be when the show was getting so good. They always leave on a sick cliffhanger. And I remember, I'm gonna be really specific here. And the girls that get it. But My Babysitter's a Vampire would be so guilty of a mid-season finale. And I was so sick of it because it would always be right before someone gets attacked or right before someone turns into like a vampire or a werewolf. And it's just so sick, and I'm glad that I finally have a platform and a place to talk about this because I've been holding it within me for so long, you don't understand. But that's all to say that mid-season finales are literally just times for networks to take a break and actually catch up on the next season's worth of content, which I didn't know. According to this one article, broadcast television productions are always produced from September to May and then shown in blocks of time on each station. But most of these shows break in February because it's after holiday season, but too short of a month to continue production. But basically in February, when all these shows will be on their mid-season break and they like show reruns, the people working on the show are like in the process of like writing the next season or for like filming the next season, having that season in production so that it can be ready for people in March, which is so wild to me. Like, I'd never considered it like that, and now that I say it out loud, that might not be as impressive. And it might have been a little obvious, but to me, that was interesting. And whose page are you on right now? Right. So I hope you found that a little interesting too. Come correct. Watch your mouth. And that sort of kind of transitions into my next topic of why the world of streaming and the situation that we're in now is a thing now. Because in contrast to shows releasing on a regular schedule but taking these mid-season breaks, streaming services of the time began batch dropping their shows as opposed to releasing them week after week throughout the year, which created and promoted the binge watching culture that we are so accustomed to today. And that very quickly became the norm because, let's be honest, it's a lot easier and a lot more comfortable to binge watch a 10 episode show rather than a 24 episode one, because I think just hours wise, like sitting down in one spot, that's just a lot, you know? Like 10 hours, you can knock that out within a day. Like, you can wake up on one day and finish a whole season in a day while taking like breaks to eat, go to the bathroom, you know, do your human necessities. But 24 hours is a little excessive. Like, you can't, that takes at least 2, maybe 3 days if you're really being a tryhard. And because of this convenience on the consumer side, execs in the industry took notice to this and really went full force into streaming, as you know. We have so many different streaming services right now, it's hard to keep up, and a lot of them are not doing the best. And from their point of view, there was a lot to gain from the rise of shorter seasons and batch dropping episodes. For one, from the company's standpoint, it's far less risky to produce a show with 8 to 10 episodes rather than 22 to 24, because if the show flops, that's not as much of an investment and it's not as much content just going down the drain. Because if you create 22 episodes worth of a show and leave a cliffhanger at the end, like that's pretty bad. That would look pretty bad, and it would be a waste of money as opposed to like a scrappy 8 to 10 episode show that just comes out and doesn't do well. 2, streaming allows for shows to be churned out a lot faster to the point where you can have dozens of shows come out within the same month, each and every month, so there's never a lack of new content. And 3, in theory, the content would be better quality because it's shorter and has less time to have like filler or things that are not necessarily plot driven. But as you know, especially as of recently, streaming isn't all that it's cracked up to be, and there are a lot of issues with how things are done nowadays, which negatively impacts us as consumers as well as the actors and talent involved in the making of these shows. Starting with us, because these shorter shows are so low risk, we see not only a lot of shows that are just junk and that no one really cares about, but 2, on the flip side of that, we see a lot of shows come out that are actually genuinely good, but aren't given the time to actually grow a fan base and cultivate a cult following, because by industry standards, if a show isn't a hit within like the first week or so, it's considered a flop. I'm not saying that that's exactly how things are done, that's just my headcanon and how I've been seeing things, but it's really a loss for us because if these shows don't get picked up immediately, they end up getting canceled, and that's why we see so many different canceled shows that maybe within the first week aren't doing record numbers, but later on, more gradually, more people discover the show, love the show, and become huge stans of it. And of course, the problem that I mentioned before is that a lot of these things that are being churned out are just the first season or like pilot seasons of shows. In order for shows to be picked up and get a second season, as a viewer, you're waiting for at least 1.5 years to 2 years, maybe even 3 or 4 for us Euphoria and Stranger Things stans, which sounds so ridiculous to someone who isn't really super into entertainment or the industry. Because like you'd think if they're making fewer episodes of a show, that would result in a faster turnaround time. But for some reason, we're seeing shorter seasons and longer wait times between seasons. And that was the case even before the strikes. Like now, forget it. And it's just honestly really frustrating as a viewer in the current state of entertainment and TV. But I feel like that pales in comparison to the negative impacts that streaming has on the actors themselves. While the streaming era has made so many different actors stars, brought them fame, fortune, and all the likes, there are also some really major cons to this era, which we are seeing being brought up in the actors and writer strikes. For example, because of the way that shows are being created nowadays, acting during the streaming era is more akin to like a gig economy as opposed to a stable career where people maybe 5-10 years ago would know that they're going to be a series regular on a show that is definitely going to get renewed year after year after year. So there's a form of security there, because as of right now, based on different testimonials from actors that have come out and talked about their experiences in support of the strike, or even before that with Sydney Sweeney when she was talking about how acting doesn't pay the bills, when these shows are being produced, actors are locked into these certain projects that they're working on for a set amount of time, which may be like a month or maybe 2 months, and they're paid for that time. And as we know now, the pay for that varies depending on if you're like a series regular or like supporting cast. Regardless, not being paid very well. Like if you're not like an 11 or like a Rue or of that sort, not being paid super amazingly well. And then after that show's done filming, you're kind of unemployed until you find the next gig, because you don't know if that show that you just filmed for is going to take off or get a season 2 or even do well. So people are constantly hopping from project to project, taking while they can, while some are also working other jobs, if they're not taking the traditional like actor influencer route to make ends meet, because acting during the streaming era for the majority of actors does not provide solid job security because this era of streaming is so volatile. And with shorter seasons and longer gaps, you can see how this issue becomes even more of an issue, because getting paid for 8 episodes as opposed to like 22 episodes and then having to wait like 1 year to 3 years to be paid again for that project if you get on that show again is a little wild to me. And again, like I said, this may not be as much of an issue for the leads of these huge shows, like the main stars may not be feeling this as much, but for everyone else a part of the production, the other actors, supporting cast, the crew, the makeup artists and such, this is the reality. And as a consumer, that's like my main gripe with what's going on with streaming right now. Like, who is it really benefiting at this moment? Like, if this is supposed to be a more efficient way of working, it's not working for the actors. It's clearly not working for the writers. And it's not really working for us either, because even though we're getting more and more shows than ever, we're being starved of good quality content that we actually want to see. And the things that we actually do want to see end up getting randomly canceled for some reason. So it really does make you think, who is benefiting from this? Oh wait, the industry and the executives. Right. Which again, to reiterate, makes so much sense why actors, writers, and everyone in entertainment is striking right now. Because the conditions in the state of entertainment are not preferable or really beneficial to anyone right now besides people at the top. But strike industry stuff aside, let's circle back to talking about the power and the difference of batch dropping shows on streaming as opposed to releasing shows week by week. Now, like I said before, the batch drop is one of the reasons why streaming did take off near its inception. But nowadays, shows that are really taking off and like are really making their impact have taken a step back from the batch drop approach and have gone back to releasing week by week. I've been seeing a lot of success from it, which is very interesting. Because from a convenience and binge standpoint, sure, dropping episodes all at once is convenient, it's easy, and it's comfortable for people. But from a cultural relevance side, if you want a show to be infamous and to be talked about a lot, dropping week to week is the only way to do it, babes. Case in point, that show that sounds like Euphoria. Like, one thing about that era, even though there were only 8 episodes, everyone was tuned in on Sundays. And I don't think I've seen a show in recent time have the power that that show had, where the show could drop on Sunday and people are talking about it until the next Sunday, until the next episode drops. Like, discourse is happening on every single social media platform, in person, online, everywhere. Everyone is talking about it for literally 8 weeks straight, which is insane, because because it's clear as day that sort of pull just does not happen when you batch drop a show. Like, think of the stalker serial killer show that sounds like Shoe. Like, it kind of made noise, but it was not making noise at all in the same way as that show that sounds like Euphoria, because it got batch dropped at once. Like, sure, people were talking about it for the week, but after that week, people are bored and they're done. They moved on to something else because I've seen everything. So it's just really interesting to see that sort of return to old form in the streaming era. But yeah, that's pretty much what I've been thinking about as of late. I know that I mentioned this briefly in like my community tab section. Again, if you have not already subscribed and turn on post notifications so that you can be a part of that and know when I post, handle yourself accordingly. But for the time being, while the strikes are going on, I'm going to be drastically reducing the amount of show review content coming out in support of the actors and writers striking right now. I know a lot of you are looking forward to my reviews on some shows that are coming out in August and September. I will be getting to those eventually once a resolution is found and the strike is ended. But for the time being, I'm going to take a little break from that and going to dive more so into commentary and other things of that nature. So I really hope you stick around, and I really appreciate y'all for understanding and always supporting me. So love ya. But now I want to hear from you. Do you still think you can watch 20+ episode seasons, or does that just sound like too much for you now? For me, I personally don't know if I have the patience anymore, honestly, to sit through 22 episodes. Like, shows that are like 10 episodes long now are kind of like pushing it for me, which is really sad. It's really, really, really sad. But yeah, that's just my truth. What's yours? Let me know in the comment section below. But yeah, thank you again so much for watching. Again, if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Like this video if you enjoyed. Follow me on my socials here at Imurgency. And other than that, I will see you in the next video. Peace.